Well, good morning, everybody. It's so good to see you all here. Hey, here's the deal. If this is your first time here and you haven't stopped by the Connect desk, that's on my left, your right in the lobby, please do so on your way out. We'd love to get a chance to meet you and answer any questions you have about Mosaic Church. Well, here's the deal. I'm super excited this morning because my favorite worship services typically involve one of two things. Communion, when we get a chance to recognize what Jesus Christ has done for us, and baptism, when we get a chance to celebrate with people who are going public with their faith in Jesus Christ. And this morning, we get to do both, so it's going to be a great morning. So here's the deal. I need you guys to stand up with me. We're going to worship together, and during the first two songs, we're going to start baptizing some people. They're going to be right over here. You'll be able to see them on the side screen. When they come out of the water, man, make sure you guys go crazy for them, all right? Let's worship together.
Come on, let's put our hands together. Let's celebrate.
Today, and we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place, and we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today, and we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place, and
church applaud his goodness this morning?
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me.
Sing it this morning.
The sun sets free. Oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, He has ransomed me. His grace rose to me. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died for me. For the Son sets free. Oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
That's our story this morning. We are his sons and we are his daughters. Amen. We're children of God. We're chosen, not forsaken. Let's worship and thank him for that this morning. Sing it. I am chosen, not forsaken. Come on. I am who you say I am. You are for me. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say. Come on, sing it again, church. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say. Worship him today. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. That's right. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you
That last song we sang is called Who You Say I Am. As we're singing, I can't help but remember that just a couple weeks ago, as we're walking through this series called Painkillers, Brandon talked about the fact that one of the biggest pains in our lives is allowing other people to label us. And so maybe you're here and you struggle with that. I think we all do to some level. But just remember that there's only one person, one God who has a right to tell us who we are, to put a label on us. And that's the true God and his son, Jesus Christ. So go ahead and be seated. But here's the deal. If you still struggle with that, I want to encourage you guys, go back and listen to that sermon. Again, you can see it 2 weeks ago. You can always check it out on our website at mosaicgc.com. Well, this time, we're going to continue worshiping through giving. And you can give in a lot of different ways. If you check out the side screens, you'll see the different ways you can give. And here's the deal. If you've given in the past year, in 2022, you probably have something on your mind that the rest of us have on our minds, and that is your giving statement. So you should have already received an email from PushPay, so you can access that giving statement. We want to make sure you have that for tax purposes. But if for some reason you did not get that email, please go ahead and log into PushPay. Make sure it has a correct email, and there you'll be able to find that statement there. But if for some reason you still have a problem getting it, go ahead and give us a call here at the church. You can email Carol Williams. She's in charge of our finances. You can email her at carol@mosaicgc.com. Last thing, but certainly not least, if you have kids, birth through 5th grade, and you bring them here, then we're really excited you're bringing them. But if you're bringing them here to this room right now, I want to let you know this is not the best place for your kid. Because every service we have a children's ministry going on over here, and it's called Mo Kids. And that's the best place for your kid because we've got volunteers who love kids. We have staff that have put together curriculum to speak to your children about who Jesus is. And there's other kids that want to become friends with your kids, which will hopefully spark a lifetime of friendship. So here's the deal. If you have children, we highly encourage you guys, start taking them over to Mo Kids. I have no doubt you'll be really, really thankful that you did. Well, like I said earlier, we're in the middle of a series called Painkillers, and today is actually the last one on painkillers. So before Brandon comes out, let's go and pray together. God, as we sang, God, as we discussed, we are so thankful that God, you are the only one that has a right to label us, and God, the label that you put upon us is a child of God. God, whether we know you or not, you love us. But God, you love us so much that you want us to have a relationship with you. And so you sent your son, Jesus Christ, to pay the price for that sin. And so, God, I pray that anybody in this room that maybe doesn't know you, God, I pray that today is the day they come believing knowledge of you. Or, God, the people that do already know you that maybe struggle with allowing the world to label them, God, I pray that you just draw them to yourself, remind them of how much you love them. In your name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning, everybody. So glad that you guys are back with us in the room. I want to welcome those who are watching online, as well as all those who are in our overflow space. We are so glad that you have chosen to join us for the 5th and the final week of a series called Painkillers. Throughout this series, I've been telling you over and over again that pain is an unavoidable part of life. Everybody deals with pain, okay? Young people deal with pain. It's usually some kind of emotional pain. Old people deal with pain. It's usually some kind of physical pain or ailment that is troubling them, right? But both people deal with pain, right? Single people and married people, they both deal with pain, right? We know this. Rich people and poor people, they all deal with pain because pain really is an unavoidable part of life. Now, throughout this series, we've used a number of different cultural examples to try to get us thinking together about the problem of pain. In one week, we talked about the TV show House. Anybody remember that week? We talked about how he was a man who was filled with all kinds of pain and he couldn't deal with his pain unless he was popping Vicodin, right? We talked about that. Last weekend, I walked you through the lyrics of the REM song, Everybody Hurts, and we saw a very depressing example of how the world has very little to offer us in our time of pain. This week, though, I've been thinking about a movie that came out back in 2014. This movie was directed by Angelina Jolie, and the name of the movie was Unbroken. I'm curious, how many of you have ever seen this movie? Let me see your hands real quick. Okay, a lot of you have seen the movie. Some of you have not. For those of you who have not seen the movie, it's a movie that's based on the true story of a man named Zamperini. In real life, Zamperini, he was captured and he was taken to and kept in a Tokyo prisoner of war camp. While he was there, he was a man who had to endure all kinds of beatings, and he experienced all kinds of pain. And yet through it all, he remained unbroken. It didn't matter what they threw at him. There was nothing they could do to him that could break him down. And I want the same to be true in your life. I want you to develop such healthy habits like you see in the person of Jesus Christ that it doesn't matter what life throws at you. There's no way that you are going to be broken. Pain really is an unavoidable part of life, but I want you to learn that the pain you live through, it does not have to break you. If you follow Jesus, and I mean really follow the example of Jesus, what you will see is that the last day of his life was the most painful day of his life. You'll see that Jesus in that day found all kinds of healthy ways to deal with his pain, and he resisted the temptation to deal with his pain in the many unhealthy ways in which we cope with our pain. If you follow that example of Jesus, if you keep that eternal perspective, if you hold on to the promises of God, if you learn how to pray through your pain and invite God into your situation that is causing your pain, if you find the purpose of your pain, then you are well on your way to being unbroken. Everybody deals with pain, but not everybody is dealing with their pain in the healthy ways in which Jesus dealt with his pain. In fact, every week I have told you in this series that most of us are dealing with our pain in a way that is hurting us rather than in a way that is truly helping us. And so as we come to the very end of this series, I want you to do an assessment on yourself. And the question that I want to ask you is this: are the wounds in your life getting any better? As you think about the deepest pain that you deal with in your life, we've been in this series for 5 weeks now. Can you look at your life and see that the wounds are starting to heal, or do you look at your life and say, no, the wounds are getting worse? Here's what I believe about people. I really do believe that some of the things we try, they don't work at all. And some of the things we try make it even worse. I'll give you an example of each. When my daughter was maybe 4 or 5 years old, we did not live at the beach, but we went to visit the beach for our family vacations. And so this one particular year, we were hanging out at the beach. She was swimming out and playing in the water, and she got stung by a jellyfish. Now, I had heard somewhere that if someone gets stung by a jellyfish, it hurts, and there's something you can do to ease the pain, right? Now, I'm not going to get into all of the specifics, okay? But apparently peeing on someone who has been stung by a jellyfish doesn't really ease the pain. That's not true, okay? According to my daughter, it doesn't really help. It's just warm and gross, and so it distracts your mind from the pain for a little while, because as a 4-year-old, you are being scarred by what is happening to you in the moment, okay? Think the jellyfish wound is going to leave a scar. No, there's another scar, right? So sometimes we try things that don't really help. And sometimes we try things that actually hurt. My buddy Mart, he has 3 boys. They're all grown and out on their own now, great young men. When they were little and Mart was raising all of these boys, he would take them hunting and fishing all the time. Mart really did believe that the key to raising good boys is to keep them outside, okay? Mart understands that boys are made for adventure. Boys are either going to find that adventure in a safe place, or they are going to find that adventure in a very dangerous place. At least that's what he told his wife so that she would let him buy a boat, okay? So for all you dads out there who are like, I need a good reason to buy a boat, you're welcome, okay? But Mart would take these boys fishing all the time. And so one day they went out on the boat and they were fishing for trout, and they got on a really big pile of trout, okay? They were throwing it out and reeling them in as fast as they could. They would get the fish off, either throw it in the cooler or back in the water. Mart would be handing them more bait to get that line back in the water as quickly as possible. It was a magical moment, the kind of moment that most guys who fish, they dream about it, but it rarely happens. As they were fishing, one of the boys is reeling one in, and he pulls up a saltwater catfish. And when Mart sees that it's a saltwater catfish, Mart said, hey, hand that one here. I'm going to get that one off the hook for you. He knows that a saltwater catfish can sting you, and if it stings you, it's going to hurt you. Now, Mart was in a little bit of a hurry, got a little careless. Saltwater catfish stung him in the hand. Now, the problem is they were having a great time. They were on a pile of fish, and they did not want to leave. The boys were having too much fun. And so Mart decided he was just going to tough it out. Now, if a saltwater catfish ever stings you in the hand, it puts a little poison under the skin. That poison starts to run through the hand, and it will even run up into your arm. And so Mart is trying to tough it out, but he is feeling the pain of this sting. And it gets so bad at one point, Mart just says, man, it's burning so bad, I just shoved my arm down into a cooler of ice, and I hopped on the old-fashioned flip phone. It was before smartphones. And he called his wife, and he said, hey, I got stung by a catfish, and it is killing me. I need you to hop online and tell me what I'm supposed to do. And so Mart's got his arm just buried in that cooler of ice, waiting for his wife to figure it out. She hops back on the line, and she says, hey, it says here you're supposed to run the hottest water you can stand on it. Mart's looking down at his arm in this cooler of ice, and he's starting to realize, I am dealing with my pain in a way that is hurting me, not in a way that is helping me. Isn't that the way that it goes for so many of us in our lives? We're hurting, and we just instinctively do whatever we think we can do to try to ease the pain. We try to do something that will make us feel a little bit better. But in some cases, what we try doesn't work. And in other cases, what we try makes the situation even worse. I don't want that for you. God doesn't want that for you. And so he goes to great lengths to record the last day of Jesus' life that was the most painful day of his life. And he shows us in the person of Jesus what are some healthy ways in which we can deal with our pain that will actually heal the wounds in our life. One of the things that Jesus does, as we've seen in John chapter 17, is Jesus prays about his pain. Because Jesus knows that when it comes to the pain in your life, you have not done everything that you can do until you've prayed. You haven't done everything you can do until you have invited God into your situation to do everything that he can do. And so in John 17, Jesus is praying about his own pain. He's praying for his disciples in their time of pain. And as he comes to the end of this prayer, Jesus is going to highlight 2 mistakes that most of us make as we're trying to deal with our pain. And if you make these mistakes, I'm telling you today, it will not make you feel better, but it really will make your pain even worse. John chapter 17, verses 20 to 23, Jesus is praying, and this is what he says. It says, my prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me. Here we go again. That they may be one as we are one. I and them, you and me, so that they may, here we go again, be brought into complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. In verse 20, Jesus is pivoting in his prayer. He's moving from praying for his followers who were with him right then, right there. And now he is praying for everyone in the future who would become one of his followers. People who would hear their message and say, I'm going to become a follower of Jesus. I'm asking Jesus to be the one who forgives my sins and heals my life. And so if you are a follower of Jesus, Jesus actually prayed for you in these verses. Specifically, Jesus prays for unity. In verse 21, he prays that we would all be one. He wants you and I to be on the same page. He wants us to be unified. He wants this church to be in unity with other churches all around our community and even all over the world. In verse 22, he prays that we would be one just as he and the Father were one. And in verse 23, he prays that all of his followers in the future would be brought into complete unity. Now, the question is, why is it that in the middle of so much pain, Jesus is so concerned about unity? It's because he knows that when we feel pain, we have a tendency to turn on each other rather than turning to each other. Do you ever do that? Like you feel pain, and when you feel pain, you have this really strong urge to blame somebody else for the pain that you're dealing with in life. Come on, in your marriage, you got a marriage that's full of pain, and what happens? The wife is blaming the husband, and the husband's blaming the wife, and they act like neither one of them have any responsibility, and it's 100% the other person's fault that we're in this situation, right? Look at the pain in this country. What are we doing? The left is blaming the right is blaming the left. The news isn't even news anymore. It's just one big attempt to spin it and to blame the other side of the aisle for why we are experiencing so much pain in this country. And yet, what did Jesus warn us? Jesus warned us politically and personally that a kingdom divided against itself will not stand. We better wake up and we better understand that in our time of pain, we need to be unified with one another. What did Adam and Eve do in the garden when they experienced the pain of sin and the pain of the consequences of sin? They started blaming everybody, right? God, it was the woman that you put here on the earth, and she's blaming the serpent, and they're both blaming God, and everybody's blaming everybody else, because when we feel pain, we have a tendency to turn on each other rather than turning to each other. I know I've done it. I've lived through a lot of different types of pain in my life. I have felt the pain of rejection. I've felt the pain of loneliness. I've had to deal with the pain of a father wound in my life. I felt physical pain. I felt all kinds of pain. The most painful season of my life, I was in my mid to late 20s. Steph and I were young, and our marriage was not good. Like, when I say it wasn't good, I mean, it wasn't good to the point that I didn't think I had any business even being a pastor. Not good. I was in a very frustrating place in my life. By my mid to late 20s, I had spent 7 years going through college and going through seminary, all in an attempt to prepare myself to be a pastor. And now I feel like I can't even be a pastor. My late 20s, I've quit my job, trying to figure out where my life is headed. I'm trying to figure out marriage. I remember sitting in my kitchen on Calico Road in East Tennessee, and I remember my mother-in-law saying to me, "You seem so angry." And I said to her, "I am angry." The truth is, I was really angry at myself, but I was taking it out on everyone around me. I was turning on the people who loved me most rather than turning to the people who loved me most. I didn't want to talk to them about the situation that we were in. I didn't want to talk to Steph about the marriage problems that we were having because I was pretty convinced that everyone was mad at me. I didn't have the capacity to deal with anything else. I mean, I don't even know where my life is headed. I don't know what I'm going to do for a living. I don't know how I'm going to take care of this family if we can keep this family together. And I couldn't address all of the things because I didn't trust the people that I was in relationship with. See, that's the problem, is I underestimated the people who loved me most. I knew deep down inside that they loved me, but I forgot about the fact that they also loved Jesus, and that Jesus came into the world to create a kind of community where we could be there for one another, even if it is my fault. You need to believe that God has put people in your life that you can turn to rather than turn on, because if you don't believe that, then you are going to deal with your pain in a really unhealthy way. In verse 22, Jesus says something really strange. He said, "I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one just as we are one." And so I want you to think about that relationship for just a minute. The relationship between the Father and the Son. The Father in heaven, He gave glory to the Son, and it made them one. Now Jesus is turning around and He's taking that glory that the Father has given to Him, and He's giving it to us. What in the world is Jesus talking about? All He's saying is, I want you guys to treat one another the same way that you have seen the Father in heaven treating me. How did the Father treat the Son in His time of pain? He comforted Him. He listened to Him. He didn't criticize Him. He loved Him. He cared for Him. He honored Him. He affirmed Him, right? At His baptism, what happened? We're told that the heavens opened up and that the Spirit of God descended on Jesus like a dove. Man, people saw that. We're told that while the heavens were opened up, that the audible voice of God the Father spoke, and He said, "This is my Son, this is my boy in whom I am well pleased." Like, everybody heard it because the Father was glorifying, He was honoring, He was affirming His Son at a difficult time in His life. And now Jesus is saying about all of His future followers, I just want you guys to treat one another the same way the Father has treated me. I really do believe that Jesus came to create a kind of community where people could lift one another up rather than tearing one another down. And yet this is the exact opposite of what you see in our world. When you look around at our world, the world is talking about people in their time of pain. Followers of Jesus go and they talk to people in their time of pain. We don't talk about them. We don't gossip about them. We go to them and we say, "Man, tell me what's going on in your life. I know this has got to be a difficult season. Talk to me about what you're going through and what I can do to help you and how I can be praying for you." The world goes around criticizing people in their pain and canceling people in their pain. Not followers of Jesus. Followers of Jesus, we comfort people in our time of pain. We even help correct one another in our time of pain. And when we start to treat people the way Jesus wants us to treat people, it brings us into complete unity that Jesus prayed for there in verse 23. And so when you're living through a painful season, you have a choice. You can either turn on the people of God, or you can turn to the people of God. You can either deal with your pain in a really healthy way, or you can deal with it in a really unhealthy way, blaming everyone and lashing out in aggression at everyone around you. This right here is why we have community groups at Mosaic. But because we know and we understand how the world treats people in their time of pain, and we understand and we know how Jesus expects us to treat one another in our time of pain. And so we're creating communities here, small groups here, where you can talk to people, where you can know one another and listen to one another and love one another and encourage one another and build one another up, even during the most difficult days of your life. But that's just one of the mistakes that we make. We don't just turn on one another. Even worse than that, we make the mistake of turning on God. Listen to what Jesus prayed in these last set of verses, verses 24 to 26. He says, Father, I want those you have given me to be with me where I am, and to see my glory, the glory you have given me, because you loved me before the creation of the world. Righteous Father, so important. Though the world does not know you, I know you, and they know you have sent me. I have made them known to you, and will continue to make you known, in order that the love you have for me may be in them, and that I myself may be in them. And so the last day of Jesus' life, remember, it's the most painful day of Jesus' life. And on that day, what Jesus is praying is he's praying, God, I'm praying that they would stick together, but I'm also praying that they would stick with us. Jesus is praying and he's saying, God, I want them to have unity with one another, but I also want them to have unity with me and my Father. This is so important because when we feel pain, we have a tendency to turn on God rather than turning to God. This is not what you see in Jesus. This is not the example that he set for us. Jesus knew exactly what he was getting ready to go through. Jesus knew all of the emotional and physical pain that he was getting ready to bear. But even in that pain, as he's staring down the barrel, he didn't turn on God. He turned to God. And when he turned to God, he addressed him in verse 25 as righteous Father. He's not questioning his Father. He's not blaming his Father. He's not mad at his Father that he's getting ready to be beaten and crucified on a Roman cross. He is declaring that his Father is righteous, that his Father is always right in the way he thinks. He is declaring to the world that his Father is right in the way he acts. I see that mindset, I see that faith in Jesus, but I got to tell you, I rarely see that faith and that kind of mindset in people. In our lives, when the pain is cranked up, very few people get to that place. In our time of pain, our tendency is to turn on God rather than turning to God. That's exactly what you see in the story of Job and Job's wife. I mean, come on. You cannot do a series on pain and not mention Job at least one time, okay? Out of all the people who have ever lived, Job knew pain in a way that very few people understand pain. One day, Job wakes up and it's just like every other day. He walks outside. He sees a storm rolling in. All his kids are hanging out together in one of the brothers' houses. That storm gets violent. Storm strikes that house. The house collapses. And every single one of his kids died. A little bit later that day, the Sabaeans and the Chaldeans, they attack. They swoop in. They kill all of his servants except for one. They steal all of his livestock. And in a single day, Job lost almost every single person that he loved, and he did lose everything that he had ever worked for. You talk about a bad day. Job had a really bad day. A few days later, Job wakes up, and he's in physical pain, not just emotional pain. He looks at his body, and there are painful sores all over his body. His wife looks at him, and his wife says to him what I think a lot of people probably would have said to him. Job chapter 2, verse 9, she said, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." Now, let me tell you something. When it's your time to go, that is not the way you want to go, okay? Cursing God and dying make for a really bad combination, okay? But that's the way a lot of people go. Because there are a lot of people that when life doesn't go the way they want it to go, they get mad at God and a sense of bitterness starts to set in. I just wonder, how many of you got mad at God because of the pain in your life? Maybe you've been there. Maybe you are there. You're looking at the pain in your life, and it's made you question God. You started to blame God. You got mad at God. You've started to resent God. You reason with yourself, God could have stopped this. You've told yourself, it did not have to be this way. Either there's no God at all or God's not good and I don't want anything to do with him. Job didn't curse God, but he did question God, and that did not go well for him. You know what God said to him? Chapters 38 to 41, God said to Job, "Big boy, you're not nearly as smart as you think you are." Chapter 38, verse 4, God asked Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?" Chapter 38, verse 12, God asked Job, "In all your days, have you ever commanded the morning light?" Chapter 38, verse 19, he says, "Job, since you know so much, will you please inform me, where does light live and where does darkness reside?" Chapter 38, verse 32, he says, "Job, can you lead out a constellation in its season?" According to Tim Mackey, the point seems to be this. Job claimed that God had fallen asleep at the wheel and running the universe. And because of this divine neglect, he, being Job, has had to endure unjust suffering. God, what I'm going through is all your fault. What are you doing? Where are you in my time of pain? This happens all the time. God heard all of the questions and he heard all of Job's complaints. And then God put Job in his place. And when God was done with Job, Job finally got it. Job finally understood that he was dealing with his pain in a really unhealthy way because he was turning on God when he should have been turning to God. And so this is what Job said back to God. Job chapter 40, verse 4, he said, "God, I'm unworthy. How can I reply to you? I'll just put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer, twice, but I will say no more." Job is basically saying to God, "God, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to keep my mouth shut like I should have done all along." And you would think That God would look down at Job and go, yeah, that's what I thought, Job. And maybe that would be the end of it. But that's not the end of it. Because God wants to make a point for every single person in human history that in your pain, you do not want to turn on God. And so God goes on. 2 verses later, Job chapter 40, verses 6 through 8. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. If God is ever speaking to you through a storm, it's not good, okay? Just know that. Brace yourself like a man, Job. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me just to justify yourself? You know what God's saying to Job? He's saying, you want to talk about it, big boy? Then we're going to talk about it. But you are not going to spout off at God. You're not going to shake your fist in the face of God and try to have the last word. God is going to have the last word. Listen to me. I want to be sensitive to you in your time of pain. But I do not want to be so sensitive to you that you miss the point. In your pain, you need to remember that you don't see it all, you don't understand it all, you don't know it all. You have a very limited perspective. You have a very limited understanding, and so do I. And because of that, we don't want to be cursing God, and we don't even want to be questioning God. That is an unhealthy way to be dealing with the pain in our lives. When you start accusing God, questioning God, and blaming God, you are not in a good place. You are walking on thin ice. In your time of pain, you don't want to turn on God. What you really want to do is you want to turn to God. Isn't that what we see in Jesus over and over again? As soon as he gets done praying in the upper room, he heads straight into the Garden of Gethsemane, and he gets down on his knees and he prays to God over and over and over again. He says, God, I don't want to go through this. God, I don't want to go to a cross. I don't want to endure the beating and the pain. He doesn't turn on his Father. He turns to his Father. And you got to do the same thing. You've got to believe today that you're not going to get through it in a healthy way if you're turning on God, but you can get through it in a healthy way if you turn to God. And so that's how I want to end the service. It's how I really want to end the entire series. I want to invite you to turn to God. Some of you, you've never turned to God, but because you're so mad about the pain that you've had to deal with in your life. God is making it clear. Jesus is making it clear. There's a far healthier way for you to deal with your pain. Don't turn away from him. Don't turn on him. Turn to him. For some of you, I want to invite you back to God. You have a relationship with Jesus, but you got mad. You started to walk away. Maybe you're starting to walk away in your time of pain. You find yourself questioning God and wrestling with God and blaming God and doubting God. Can we just be honest about the problem of pain? So much of the pain in our lives, it's not God's fault. It can be attributed to the sin in our world. Sometimes it's our own sin that creates all the pain, and sometimes it's someone else's sin that's creating all the pain. But that's why he sent Jesus into the world, to help us deal with the sin that is causing our pain. Jesus came into the world and he said, man, I'm going to take on a Roman cross. That's going to be the purpose of my pain, is to help people overcome the things that are creating the pain in their lives. In fact, this was absolutely necessary. The author of Hebrews said it like this in chapter 9, verse 22. He said, without the shedding of blood, there could be no forgiveness of sins. Peter echoed the words of Isaiah when he said that by his wounds we are healed. That there is something about the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus that helps us overcome our pain. And so that's what I want to do as we end our service together. I want to really reflect on the death of Jesus Christ. by taking communion together. I want to say that if you're not a follower of Jesus, you can become one right now, right where you sit. You can say, Jesus, I've been dealing with my pain in a very unhealthy way. I'm trusting, Jesus, that you came to forgive my sins, you came to heal my wounds, and you came to lead my life so that I would not continue to deal with my pain in these kinds of unhealthy ways. And when you pray a prayer like that, it brings you into a relationship with Jesus. It brings you into a relationship with the Heavenly Father, and He can start to heal the pain and the wounds in your life. If you need communion elements, we have volunteers around the room who can get those to you. If you're a follower of Jesus, maybe you're thinking about God today and you're mad at God. Maybe today you need to say, God, I'm sorry. Help me to believe that you have a purpose for my pain, just like you had a purpose for Jesus' pain. I want to invite you at this time to peel off the top layer of the communion elements. I want to remind you that Jesus took this meal with his disciples in the upper room as he prayed this very prayer in John chapter 17. It was a painful night in Jesus' life. But he took that bread and he looked at it. He looked at all of his followers and he said, this right here is my body, which is about to be broken for you. And then he told them, he said, I want you to eat this as you remember my pain. And they took it and they ate it. Then Jesus took a cup. I can't even imagine how he's feeling as he thinks about what he's getting ready to go through. But he looked at the disciples that he loved and he said, I'm going to go through it because I love you, I want to heal you, and I want to live with you forever. So he passed the chalice around the room and he said to his followers, he said, I want you to drink it and I want you to remember me. And they drank it together. Dear God, we are humbled that you came into the world as a man to endure terrible pain, to help us know how we can deal with our own pain. God, we are thankful for Jesus. We're thankful for the sacrifice that he made. God, for those who walked in here today and did not have a relationship with Jesus, I pray, God, that they would pray that simple prayer, that they would trust that Jesus came to forgive their sins, to heal the wounds in their life, and to lead their life so that they didn't have to live in this cycle of dysfunction and unhealthy living as we try to cope with the real pain that we deal with. I pray, God, that they would wholeheartedly put their faith in you, and pray, God, that they would let us know about it so that we could help them take the next step of baptism as we've seen others take today. God, I just pray that you would take this entire series and whatever thoughts people need to remember, I pray, God, that you would cause it to linger in their life. And I pray, God, that you would really heal the wounds, that you would help us to deal with our pain in healthier ways. And I pray, God, that as a result of this series, pray, God, that your people would experience real healing in their lives. And I pray it all in Christ's name. Amen. As we close the service, I've ended 7 minutes early. And so I've done that because I want to ask you to do me a favor. I want us to sing one closing song together. The song is called Never Once. But for all of you who have ever been mad at God in your pain, wanted to blame God, question God, or even turn on God in your pain, this is a song where we can sing it together and declare back to God that God is good. That never once, in the dark times of our lives, in the painful days of our lives, never once did we ever walk alone. Never once was God unjust. Never once was God unwise. But God has always been good, even when life is really bad. And so would you please stand and let's sing it together as we close our series.
Standing on this mountaintop, looking just how far we've come, knowing that for every step you were with us. Kneeling on this battleground, seeing just how much you've done, knowing every victory is your power in us. Scars and struggles on the way, but with joy our hearts can say, yes, our hearts can say. Never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did you leave us on our own. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. Kneeling on this battleground, seeing just how much you've done, knowing every victory is your power in us. Scars and struggles on the way, but with joy our hearts can say, yes, our hearts can say. Never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did you leave us on our own. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. Scars and struggles on the way, but with joy our hearts can say, never once did we ever walk alone. Carried by your constant grace, held within your perfect peace. Never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did you leave us on our own. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. Every step we are breathing in your grace. Nevermore we'll be breathing out your praise. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. You are faithful, God. Oh, we love you, God. 'Cause you are faithful, God, you are faithful. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. You are faithful, God, you are faithful.
Hey, real quick before you guys leave, one of the things Brandon talked about was, we're designed to do life together in community. So if you're an adult in this room and you are not involved in the community group, we invite you to get involved. We have volunteers in the lobby there at some pub tables. They're all community group leaders. They would love to tell you more about this ministry. Stop by and talk to one of them about them. We love you guys. Have a great week.